Welcome to Blue 57 Scouting Report. I'm Coach Jay in Jacksonville, Florida. I am joined by Alexis Ortiz in New York City. Alexis, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It got a little cold down here in Florida last night. I think it hit 50 degrees, so I guess that's summer weather for you guys. But anyway, I know it's been a big week in sports. Last Sunday, Derek Mason with Vanderbilt was relieved of his duties, and that's the second Power Five coach to be fired, with still a game left in the season. And I just want to get your take on what you think happened there and what was going on.
Well, Coach, he went 0-8, which after their big loss to Missouri, 41-0, obviously something needed to be done. Like we spoke about previously, winning is what people want to see, what the fans want to see, what the schools want to see. But really what surprised me is that he had a great time at Vanderbilt. He was the second coach to lead Vanderbilt to 2 bowl games, and in 2016 to 2018, he led Vanderbilt to 5 victories and 3 straight seasons. So it's just like, what happened here? What happened this season? Why wasn't he producing the same results?
Well, I think part of that is that with them just going with an all SEC schedule, he would have normally picked up another at least 3 games, and they would have typically been wins for them. So
Mhm.
by them not getting those games, and you know how it is when you start to lose, and every single week you lose, and the team you're playing next week is better than the team you're playing this week, it starts to wear on those coaches and the players, and so it just makes it very improbable that you're going to win.
I agree. It's definitely difficult, and you need to capture those wins as soon as possible, and you have to be ready for whatever competition comes your way.
I think he tried to throw a little twist in it by bringing out a female kicker to be the kicker for them. That Sarah Fuller was the first woman to play in a game. She did not get to kick a field goal because unfortunately they didn't score any points last week. But I'm not saying that it was a gimmick, but the timing on it was pretty interesting. I think it did kind of draw a lot of attention to them, and they were already struggling. The interesting thing about it is they've been trying to get a quarterback all year long, and they finally got a quarterback commit last week, and then they fired the head coach. So I'm not sure how that whole thing's going to play out. But this week will be a sorry, this week will be a big week with last week of SEC ACC games. So I think we're going to see a lot more firings starting Sunday. And after the last game for the SEC and ACC teams, I think you're going to start seeing some firings coming through. And so it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out.
It definitely will. It's going to be like a ripple effect. Now all these coaches have to be on their P's and Q's, make sure that they're producing these wins, because that's what the fans really want to see.
Right. So anyway, I know just by looking at the Blue 57, just checking out our Twitter feed, there's been a lot of decommits in the past week. So we are 11 days out from signing day, from the early signing period. So I'm very interested to hear what your boys, the information that they got, and just find out what's going on with the just commits, decommits, and the rankings for this past week.
So we're going to have Grant talk to us today about decommits and Samuel again with recruiting rankings.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So, sorry about that. Had a lot of technical difficulties today, but I'm trying to get on it. But for Power 5, we've seen a lot of decommits, whether it's SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12. All of those teams are really, I think they've got to be scrambling right now. Tennessee just lost one of the top 10 players in the nation, Terrence Lewis, who's an inside linebacker from Florida. Great player. They lost him and Demarius McGee, who are both from Florida. So that's just big hit to Tennessee. We've also seen a few losses from the Pac-12 as well. Jake Garcia, who was a USC decommit. I've got a lot of info on him. He was easily a top 10 quarterback in the class of 2021, top 10 pro-style quarterback. He's a 4-star out of Grayson High School in Loganville, Georgia. However, with all things going on with COVID, he originally was from California, played at a couple high schools there. With the rules and restrictions regarding sports there, he decided to transfer to Georgia. His first high school he went to was Valdosta in Georgia, and he was deemed ineligible due to a lack of, they called it lacking of bona fide move for him going there, and so he was deemed ineligible. He transferred to another high school, Grayson High School, in Loganville, Georgia, and he was deemed eligible, so he was able to play there. And a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen with his USC commitment. Is he going to stay? There's been a big push on Twitter from a lot of people from the Miami fan base who are saying Garcia to the U, like he's going to go to Miami. They're going to steal him. And after his decommitment, this is looking very likely. The same day, 2 days ago, when he decommitted, 4 analysts from 24/7 all predicted that he will go to the University of Miami. So I think it's possibly a big win for Miami fan base, but also keep in mind that there's plenty of talent in the area that he's at right now. I mean, he's close to University of Georgia. He's got Alabama, Auburn. I'm sure there's other schools there that could really use a quarterback like him going forward. And then just to dip into some of our other conferences and what's going on there, we have in the SEC, Auburn is offering George Wilson Jr., who's a 4-star weak side defensive end out of Green Run High School in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He was a former South Carolina commit, so one of decommits that, you know, as we've seen recent weeks with their firing of Will Muschamp, a lot of decommits have come out of South Carolina, but he's had recent offers from Florida State, Auburn, and neither of them have a weak side defensive end on their roster or committed. Just that are not committed so far. They do have a couple on their roster. However, Auburn only has 2 others. And so this is very big to give him a lot of playing time as a freshman, especially being the only commit there. This is why 3 analysts from 24/7 are saying that he's going to go to Auburn. They're predicting with high confidence he'll end up there. I think with the playing time he'll get from a young age, that would be great. And most likely we'll be seeing him go to Auburn as well. In the ACC, Wake Forest offered Billy Edwards, who's a 3-star pro-style quarterback from Lake Braddock High School in Burke, Virginia. He was a former Old Dominion commit, and Old Dominion now has no quarterback commits. And if he does commit to Wake Forest already has 2 other quarterbacks that are committed, including one from my region and that I'm a territory manager for in Jacksonville. So honestly, props to him for if he decides to go the Power 5 route, with that being his only Power 5 offer. But he might not get the playing time that he'll see, or at least it'll be a very competitive environment between the freshman quarterbacks there. And then in the Big Ten, we have former Boise State commit, Ore Adei, who's a 3-star cornerback from Mansfield Legacy High School in Mansfield, Texas. He is now committed to Northwestern. As we've seen, Northwestern is having one of their best seasons in a long time. They're 5-1. They're looking to possibly go to the Big Ten championship, facing Ohio State. And with a team that is like usually year to year in one of the bottom spots of the Big Ten recruiting rankings, Northwestern is currently 11th of, I believe, 14 teams. So with this and just how their year continues and whether they make the Big Ten championship or not, it'll be just very interesting to see how Northwestern how their recruiting will be impacted with other players. If they'll say, hey, this team's on the rise, maybe I can get a spot here, because Ori Adei, he was in a crowded cornerback room that had 12 projected on the roster next year, and now he's going Northwestern, who only has projected amount of 7. So you have a lot more playing time, and so there's just a lot of opportunities for these schools that are just outperforming how the recruiting rankings have been going. So they have a really good system there, and it was just a great move by Adei to flip there. And then our last offer of the week from the Big 12. This one's a little bit different than what we've seen before. It's actually a kicker from his name's Laith Marjan. He got an offer from Oklahoma, from William G. Enloe High School in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is Laith's first Power 5 offer, and then which was soon followed by an Oregon State offer the other day. So interesting enough, his Oklahoma offer was not listed as a preferred walk-on spot. Many of his FCS offers were to like Butler University, Valparaiso, a couple others, and these were listed as preferred walk-ons. But however, Oklahoma and Oregon State, they weren't. But kickers and specialists are usually recruited differently, as many people can be brought in to compete each training camp for that spot. And usually there's just very limited amount of scholarships that will go towards a special teamer, specifically a kicker, unless they're just pretty much a franchise 4-year kicker there. So there are already 2 other kickers on Oklahoma's roster. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how that factors into his decision making, whether he'll go as a preferred walk-on to maybe another big school. It's really up in the air, and he'll have a shot to compete pretty much anywhere. And then just to review the number of players total on our boards, we have 1,888 total players that have Power 5 offers in the 9 states that we cover: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, Alabama, Virginia, and Maryland. So all of those states factor into this, and there's almost 2,000 players that we have between the classes of 2021 and 2024 that have Power 5 offers. So this number is increasing each day, and it's just really cool to see. And we'll be seeing hopefully 2,000 by early spring, late winter. So yeah, there's just plenty of things going on: decommitments, commitments, offers, and it's been a crazy time, especially with certain deadlines pushed back, but it's going pretty much.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see, like, with these decommits, you have a lot of these kids decommitting from these Power 5 schools, and now they're looking at other Power 5 schools, but it's just like there's so many factors that go into it, like so many things they have to take into consideration. Like you said, playing time. What is your intake on that? Like, what do you think goes behind those factors that these kids are thinking when they're decommitting and possibly recommitting to another Power 5 school?
Yeah, I think I think playing time is big. I would say also just scholarship opportunity. Many players, they might come from lower income households. They need financial assistance. If they're able to get that at one school that offers them a full ride scholarship, and another that just offers them very limited amount or nothing at all, they're probably going to take what's better for their family right now. I think also proximity to home is a big piece as well. But overall, it's just that these players, they're competitive. They love playing the game. If they have an opportunity to play somewhere and they care enough about the game, they're going to go in probably somewhere that they can play right away. And this isn't for everybody, though. I mean, a lot of people, it really depends on what's going on in your family life, what's going on, other things. But I know that a lot of these players that might be decommitting or committing elsewhere for a reason is because those areas might have a little bit more space, whether it's needed depth or they just don't have a commit, as we talked about with Vanderbilt last week. They had almost 20 quarterbacks offered, and they finally got their guy. So It's just seeing that opportunity there and saying, okay, I can take this.
I agree. Those are definitely some of the factors they consider.
Hey Grant, that's excellent report. So there's a couple things that I recognized when you're talking about. Number one, basically Blue 57 covers the 9 states, and I think the numbers that you're reporting now, there's been basically 100 new offers in the somewhere around 80 to 100 offers in the last 30 days, which is a decent amount. So the new stuff is coming through. A lot more 2022 is coming through right now. I see a lot of that. The 2021 is very sparse. We're not getting 2021 Power 5 offers for the first time. Those are done. Is there anything else I'm missing with that stuff?
So I can just kind of reiterate what you're talking about with the numbers recently. So since our last show, we have 14 added players to the boards. So in 2021 only grew by 2, and this is our largest margin by far. We have 1,065 players now there. In 2022, we have 594 players, and we added 9
Big class.
since then.
That's a big
And
class.
yeah, so I mean the 2022 groups, what I've seen is that the players that are getting offers, a lot more of them I've seen have come from this like our regions that we're covering, Georgia, Florida, a lot of those 2022 guys, even Texas, some of them are already outnumbering how many the 2021 offers had from that state. So it's really interesting to just see how different some of these classes are, and just whether it's just the strength of players by different regions nationally.
So, okay, so that's good stuff. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the kid out of Loganville, the quarterback that's from California.
Mm-hmm.
The state of Georgia has very, I guess the best way to say it is they have a very political system for how they manage the whole football players and all that kind of stuff. So when I lived in Atlanta, the state of Georgia is they're freakish. They're almost too much about kids transferring from one school to another. So like in the state of Florida, we got school choice. If you are in a public school district and you say, "Hey, I don't want to go there. I want to go over to that district," as long as they got room, you can go. Now that's a recent thing. It's been within the last year, but in the state of Georgia, those kids will transfer and go to another school. They have to put an appeal before the Georgia High School Association, which is mostly run by coaches or former coaches. It is very political. I was I was working with a couple kids about 5 years ago, and they wanted to go from a public school to a private school for their senior year, and the Georgia High School Association would not let them play. They live closer to the private school, but they would not let them play, which is a total bunch of crap to me. I think that's ridiculous. So when you say that kid moved from California to Lowndes County down in South Georgia, which is an incredible area for football, apparently those guys don't have, I hate to say, I'm not going to say they don't have deep enough pockets, but they don't have as much influence on that as the men in Loganville. Loganville is a perennial powerhouse program. All those coaches are highly paid, and they have enough apartments in that district where kids move in there, sign a 6-month lease, play football. Now, the Georgia Education Department, they will actually show up at your house and walk through your house, your apartment. They're going to go through your opening up your drawers to make sure that you have clothes in there, underwear, the whole deal. Because I had another guy that I worked with, him and his dad moved into a certain area so he could go to that school. And on the first day of school at 8 o'clock in the morning, they knocked on his door, showed a badge, and said, we need to verify that you live here. Went through his place like Homeland Security, and they couldn't believe it. And I had another case where the dad was Nigerian, and he got his kids to go from one school to the other. They did the exact same thing with him. And man, it's terrible. I mean, I can't believe it that goes on. I don't know of any other state that's like that. I'm not exactly sure what their reasoning is on it, but they are that education in Georgia. They're like that. They're Gestapo like. And so I don't know what Loganville did to get them to appeal for that player to play there, but you know, seeing what we see on the news, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't something that wasn't legal that happened there. So anyway, some crazy stuff in Georgia, always. So a lot of corporations there, people with a lot of money. When you got a lot of money and stuff, sometimes people aren't doing what's totally the right thing to do. So anyway, no, that's a great report. I think that we're going to see a lot more stuff happen in the next 11 days, and so that's excellent. So anyway, anything else?
No, just keep your eyes out for any more commits, decommits, and offers. I think it's going to be a really interesting next month ahead of us, especially as we're approaching the early signing day, which is in 11 days, December 16th. So be really interested to see if any of these decommits that we've seen past week will end up flipping into just another recommit.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. We'll talk about that next week.
Thank you.
So, Lexus, this is I know when you hear me say stuff like that about Georgia, you're like, oh my gosh, that's just kind of insight from just being there and being hands-on and working with coaches. And I don't think they were remote cases. I mean, I did work in a gym where we kind of had our ears to the ground, but these were specific people that I was actually working with at that time, where they had those education people come to the house and inspect the house to make sure they live there. So they had to put pictures up. They had to, it can't just be like part-time living there. You can't just order out, that kind of thing. You got to have full blown. It's got to have, they got to verify it. And if they don't feel like you're living there full time, they're not going to let you play.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is important because of all these kids who are that are competing against each other to get into these Power 5 schools. It's important that everyone has an equal opportunity. And it's not fair if you're saying that you live in a certain area to attend a certain school. And it's just like, we got to make sure that everyone has the same opportunity and no one has an advantage over one another. So, got to do what you got to do.
I think that's partially that's kind of what their angle is on the thing is, you got little Jimmy, he's been at the school for 3 years. He's supposed to be the starting quarterback, and all of a sudden some kid comes in from California. Jimmy's out. Now this kid's the quarterback. And I think that's kind of what happened in the state of Mississippi, and it just became like the Wild Wild West. And I think that Georgia just said, we're not going to allow that here. If you're going to have to work for it. And so I get it. And, but with a lot of the states closing down, it kind of forced some of these kids in certain states that got locked down. They came to Georgia and to Florida so they could play football and still get recruited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with these times that we're going through, kids just want to be able to have that opportunity. And looking at it from that perspective, it's definitely different because now if you're thinking about states that are getting shut down and other states that are still playing, it's like, well, now they have an advantage over me. They're getting time to train and build their craft while I have to sit at home. So it's like, if I have the opportunity to go over there and play, then I'm going to take that opportunity. So I guess it just depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, it always comes back to you got to do what works best for you. You can't get caught up in what your government's doing, what your state's doing. You got to figure out what works for me, what works for our family, and you got to do what works there. And I'm not saying be selfish, but I'm saying you're the only person responsible for you. Nobody else is really going to be looking out for you. So if that's in your best interest to make that move, then you make that move.
Agreed. You definitely make the decisions for yourself, and you're in control of what your life is going to turn out to. So you got to take those opportunities when given.
Right. Awesome.
So now we're going to go over today and speak to Samuel about recruiting rankings.
How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So we'll pull up the latest top 10 from 24/7 now. Not a lot of changes in regards to everybody's position. Alabama and Ohio State stay the same as last week. They're still respectively at 22 and 20 commits. LSU lost 2 commits this week. Naquan Brown, a weak-sided defensive end from Virginia Beach, he flipped to Pittsburgh, so that was a decommit for them. And also Anthony Hundley, who is a defensive tackle from IMG. So they lost 2 commits this week. Georgia jumped Oregon. That was the only change in the top 10. They had that big commit last week with Smell Mondon. That was huge. And then also Oregon had a big decommit from a wide receiver out of Mater Dei, California. His name is Kyron Ware Hudson. He actually flipped to USC. So I think that is a bit of a cause for the flip between Oregon and Georgia. Clemson stay the same. They're at 17 commits still. Florida also at the same, still at 26. Notre Dame and Michigan stay the same as well, 23 and 21. So not a lot of movement there in the middle of the pack of the top 10. And then USC had 1 commit and 2 decommits. Like I previously just said, the commit that they had was the wide receiver out of Mater Dei, California. So he stays in state. Kyron Ware Hudson, and then the big decommit that Grant had just discussed, Jake Garcia, and then they also had a decommit from Josh Moore, who's a safety out of Atlanta, Georgia. So still a lot of movement happening. Like we said, 11 days out of early signing day. Maybe we didn't predict that there would be this much movement. A lot of kids seem to be flipping, and there still is the odd decommit, and then waiting it out to decide where they're going to commit. But that seems to be the common theme right now, is these kids are decommitting and flipping straight to a school. That's happening more so than just a decommit without recommitting to a different school. So that's the top 10. Like I said, not a lot of change. We'll definitely dive deeper into 11 through 20 next week. We'll kind of keep that in mind and keep an eye on that. Like I said, I think that there's going to be a lot of movement in the next 11 days. With Tennessee is a big one, and we discussed, or it was discussed earlier as well. They had the decommit of Terrence Lewis, who he was a big commitment when he did commit. So for him to decommit Tennessee, I'm going to be happy about that. The other big decommit of the week was Armani Goodwin. He was committed to Auburn. He's a running back out of Trussville, Alabama. He had been committed there since May 22nd, 2019. So he's been committed there for a long, long time. He just decommitted, and like it's that early signing day is coming up. So it is a little bit of a surprise. It's definitely interesting to see it, and it's interesting to dive deep into why these kids are making these decisions. A couple of other notable commits, the Mcdonald Twins, so Jaden and Jordan out of Salem, Virginia. They are both cornerbacks. They flipped their commits from Louisiana Monroe to Virginia Tech. So they're staying in Virginia, and they're both the twins, so they're cornerbacks. That's a cool story for them, is they both committed to Louisiana and then just flipped to Virginia Tech. So their family's got to be very happy about that. And the other big commit was Bryson Nesbit, a tight end out of Charlotte, North Carolina. He stays in state, and he committed to the University of North Carolina. So it's definitely interesting. We're definitely keeping an eye on all of these movements. I think that I kind of predicted last week too that I think that this will happen. It's definitely surprising. It's not something that we usually see this close, but yeah, I think that there's still going to be a lot more movement, and especially in the top 20. And we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll update the top 10 and the top 20 next week and see what kind of movements there are from that. And that even this week alone, there was still quite a few moves for the top 10. So that's the report so far for the top 10 from last week to this week.
So do you think with 11 days till signing period that the rankings will change, or you think they'll just stay the same? Maybe a little bit of movement, not that much.
Yeah, I think in the top 10 is pretty set. I think that it's definitely unpredictable, but I think there'll be a couple movements like we saw this week with Georgia jumping Oregon in 4 and 5 spots. But I don't think that we may see some other team creep into the top 10, but I don't think that there's going to be huge changes, especially at the top with Alabama, Ohio State, and LSU. I think that they're pretty set 1 through 3. Although LSU did have those 2 decommits, but yeah, I think that that's pretty set right now. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of change in the top 10. There'll be a lot of movement, but not a lot of change in the rankings.
Mhm. And it's interesting with those last 2 players that you're saying that they're moving close to home, which is something that Grant mentioned when people are decommitting to recommitting. So
Yeah, and like I said, it's these kids seem to have it in their mind. It's becoming more and more rare at this time of the year for somebody to decommit and just stay decommitted. They seem to have in their mind that they have another option in mind and will commit almost instantly after decommitting. So, and just flip to a different school. So definitely interesting. And like for those Mcdonald Twins, they're staying in state, going to Virginia Tech. That's a Power 5 school too. So they'll be happy about that.
Hey Samuel, the one thing that stands out to me the most is Auburn at number 41. That's a huge change from years past. They are usually top 15, consistently top 10, with only 12 commits there. I think that I think there's potential coaching change there. Auburn is they've had, this hasn't been the season that the Auburn fans wanted, and so when you lose a couple of games, the big games, the definitely the Alabama game, they don't like losing Alabama for sure. On top of recruiting woes, it starts to paint a picture. So I know that Gus Malzahn is a great coach. Sometimes different things pop in. You got a quarterback that doesn't convert on certain plays, and you lose a game. And so, but just curious, anything else like that you see in here?
Well, just to touch on the Auburn situation, as you can see there, 12 commits is incredibly low at this time of the year. And I think it's momentum, right? Or as quickly as you can kind of build up, that can all crash down. And I think that that's what you're seeing this year. Like you said, losing some of the big games, and then just having some struggles in recruiting. That is a downward spiral that it's tough to get out of once you're in that downward spiral. And you've seen it with other schools, with the momentum going the other way, especially earlier in the year with Tennessee. Although it hasn't stuck like they wanted it to, they had a lot of traction early in the year. They had all the momentum going for them and getting a lot of big commits. So Auburn would definitely be looking to do that, get back kind of going in the right direction. 41 is crazy for them, like you said. So I think that, like you said, it's winning those bigger games, showing up to the big games, and then just continuously trying to bring in the best players. And they, like I said earlier, they had a big decommit this week, which the kid was committed since last year. Over a year he's been, or almost a year that he's been committed to them. So yeah, it's definitely interesting there.
The thing that happens with those Tennessee recruits is Tennessee has such a coordinated presence on Twitter. Every time that some kid is offered or whatever, he gets like 100,000. I mean, it's some kind of crazy number of people that like it, retweet it. They're very coordinated on that stuff, and I'm sure that makes a lot of kids' ego get really big.
Oh, yeah.
And Tennessee, they work that thing so hard. It's so interesting to see all these different schools and how they do all that stuff. So no,
Yeah, that was definitely fun during the start of this year, seeing that Tennessee's presence on Twitter and the way that they were able to promote these players and kind of the way that they went at it. It was very aggressive, and they had kids actively recruiting their teammates or their friends or other big players just through Twitter, and they became very just active on Twitter, and that was an interesting tactic. And maybe it was because they were anticipating this to happen this year, where kids weren't able to go to the schools and they wouldn't be able to visit. And with COVID, everyone locked down. They took a different approach and took everything to social media, where a lot of people now spend most of their time recruiting. And we know that as well as anyone else, right? Is that we know that all this activity on Twitter is being monitored 24/7. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. And like I said, it's the momentum thing. They knew they rode that wave as long as they could through the Twitter and how they approached it. So unfortunately for them, it didn't stick like they wanted it to. But
the other big note on here is at number 31, 24/7 has Florida State with 15 commits. That's another major fall of grace. Florida State is a top 10 program. Since the coach left for Texas A&M, then they brought in Willie Taggart. That was a total mess. But that is totally unacceptable for a state, a school like Florida State in the state of Florida with so much talent. That is, I mean, that's totally unacceptable. I'm sure they're getting a lot of heat for that. That is a program that has a ton of resources. They bought out the previous coach. They wrote him a big check. They just said, we're done with it. We don't care about the contract. We'll pay for it. And for those guys to be at number 31, that's not good. Now they'll finish out at 25 guys, I'm sure, but it probably will not come in the next 11 days.
Yeah, and to your point, when you go fire a coach like that, your mind should be on reset and rebuild. So it goes to all your resources should go to recruiting, and to be that low, like you said, it's for them definitely not acceptable to their standards. And with Florida, University of Florida being at 7, and Miami being at 13, 2 other schools in the state, they can't be happy with that. They're way behind. Like you said, they'll probably get to the 25 commit mark, but not in the next 11 days. And who knows the quality of recruits that they're bringing in the next month or so.
Well, technically, they don't really have to go that far to get recruits. I mean, because of where Tallahassee is located, they have, they have a real stronghold on, from Orlando northbound, the Panhandle. They own the Panhandle, all North Florida. They get plenty of kids out of South Florida, out of that Miami area, but then they go into South Georgia. I mean, South Georgia is loaded with players. So, and they're close enough being in the Panhandle, where Tallahassee's located. They can go into Alabama very easily. They can get the players. So their location, there's no excuse for that. And I'm sure they're catching a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely dive deeper into that next week too. We'll kind of do a little bit of investigating and see what the situation is with Florida State, because that is definitely an interesting story. And the same goes to Auburn too. They're way below their standards. So we'll definitely kind of read into that a lot more and kind of talk about it more next week as well.
Well, that new coach at Florida State is he doesn't mince words. I know just from some of the kids that were being recruited last year. The one kid, Jeff Sims, who's at Georgia Tech now, he told Jeff Sims that he wasn't good enough to play at Florida State. So Jeff Sims signed at Georgia Tech, and then Georgia Tech beat Florida State at Florida State. Jeff Sims was starting quarterback. So maybe they're not evaluating talent that great. So I don't know. But that's great stuff. I appreciate your insight into it. That's good stuff, and we want to know what happens over the next week too. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So Lexus, the one thing that it kind of stands out to me, when you hear about teams offering guys that are kickers full scholarships, that's a serious flag. Because overall, when they recruit punters and kickers, when I talk to coaches about it, they're like, you don't know what you're going to get with a kicker. Kicker is such a middle game, it's like sit. Now all the pressure's on you. and I counsel a number of kickers, and we work every single week through all kinds of issues. And so it's hard for college coaches to bet on a high school kicker, and because you don't know what you're going to get, because once they get there, you don't know how they're going to respond to the pressure, the new environment, the whole deal, especially when it's far away. So the fact that they're offering full scholarships there, maybe it just means that they got some extra ones to give, which is very rare. But it also may mean they have no confidence in their current kickers.
I wouldn't think about it in that perspective. I'm thinking about it in like, these kids are unique, right? There's not that many kickers, or not that many kids getting these offers or committing to schools. So I think that their position is so unique to, and what they do is unique, that the fact that they're getting these full rides just means that, all right, the coach knows that you have this potential, so now you need to live up to that standard. And yes, there's a lot of pressure to fulfill that role, but you got to understand, you're one out of few that can fulfill that, whereas other positions, they have so many people to replace.
Well, they must see something in that kid where they think that he can step up to the challenge, because overall they like to bring kids on as a preferred walk-on, help them with some other scholarship money, and then once they're there, promote them to a full scholarship. But maybe that kid's maybe he's got something unique that we don't know about. But it's a different year, so all kinds of things like that are going on. The other thing that's happening is, the NCAA is letting these kids play one more senior year, so they're not counting this year. So we hadn't brought a mathematician on here yet, but at some point there's going to be a logjam, because you let kids play an extra year. Some of them don't leave. You're bringing in 25 new guys. It's the NCAA is probably doing the politically correct thing, but my guess is that a lot of these coaches are going to have to tell some players, we like you, but we don't have a spot for you. And so they're just pushing it back to the coaches. And you know what? Truthfully, that gives the coaches a little bit more wiggle room to get their best guys.
I agree. It's definitely, it's a win-win scenario if you think about it, because that senior gets that extra year, but then for those new people coming in, it's like, well, we can't offer you what we want to offer you because it's going to the senior. But that's just something, if you really want to go to that school and play for that team, you got to consider, well, I might have a chance to get some funds or some playing time once that senior leaves. But do you really want to take that chance or go somewhere where all right, I'm going in, I'm starting, and I'm getting the scholarship that I need?
Right. And when you say scholarship, basically what we're talking about is money. So the players want the money so that mom and dad don't have to take out a loan, fund the whole thing. So that's really what most high school parents are hoping for, is that their son will get a scholarship. It's a big dream for a lot of parents, and it doesn't happen for the majority of them. But for the elite group that we track and we follow, these kids, they got a lot of opportunity. So anyway, I think it was a great show this week. I appreciate all the insight, and we are coming into the playoffs for most of these states for high school, and so each week half of them are gone, so we're getting closer and closer, and we're getting closer and closer to signing day. We're coming up on 11 days on that, so it's a lot of exciting stuff. December is always pretty exciting. We're gonna be on top of this stuff. We'll follow it, and as well as Samuel and Grant. And so anyway, I want to thank you for all your insight today, and appreciate everything.
I want to thank you for having me, and I want to thank the audience for watching. Don't forget to follow us at Blue57, and if you guys like what you saw today and want to continue getting weekly updates, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.